Okay, so I finally figured out why Capcom keeps dipping monsters in paint instead of adding entirely new ones. I think there are two possibilities. One that's pretty simple, boring, and grounded, and another that could be Capcom's plan to create the single biggest addition to not just Sunbreak, but Rise as well. But first we're gonna need to go back, starting with Title Update 1 back in August. Title Update 1 brought us 4 monsters: Lucent Nargacuga, Seething Basiljuice, Silver Rathalos, and Gold Rathian. 3 of these monsters have one clear pattern that we'll see in most of the Title Update monsters, while the 4th goes for a slightly different approach. Let's cover that first group of 3 to start. What makes Seething Basiljuice so special is this right here. Seething Basil goes into this state where its scales glow purple and create larger, more dangerous explosions. Not only this, but the monster also begins a timer where it charges up its strongest attack. This is a massive attack that sees Basil throw mines all over the field before crashing into the ground in one final explosion. By virtue of having such a wide radius, this attack can be especially difficult to avoid. However, it's not just difficult to dodge, as naturally, since this is the monster's signature move, it deals a lot of damage as well. A move like this with such a large range and high damage might sound unfair at a glance, but it's that special idea I mentioned earlier that turns this into one of the most exciting mechanics in the game. See, when these scales turn purple, they open the monster up to a huge weakness that you're able to exploit. If you attack them enough, they'll actually backfire and explode on Basil, dealing a large amount of damage and knocking the monster down. The Metal Wraths have a very similar mechanic. Normally their skin is basically impenetrable, and to add to this, they barely take any damage unless you break their external shells. But when they charge up like this, they reveal a new weakness just like Basil did. Land enough attacks on these soft spots and they'll pop, leaving the monster wide open. This mechanic is great as it incentivizes the hunter to play aggressive and beat the monster at their own game if they want to avoid these deadly attacks. The only monster in this update that doesn't really follow this rule is Lucent Nargacuga. Lucent does things a bit differently. To separate itself from regular Nargacuga, it has 2 new abilities, along with an expanded moveset. The first new mechanic in this fight is Poison. This poison can lead to one attack being followed up with a storm of poison spikes that rain down, preventing the hunter from getting close unless they time their approach with the falling spikes. The second new option this monster gets is a bit more cinematic. It can go invisible and jump around, leaving only its glowing red eyes streaking across the field before it finishes with this huge tail slam. These 2 elements give Lucent Narga a slightly different feel to the regular variant. The same follows for the rest of the monsters in this title update as well, and this trend only continues in Title Update 2, albeit with one addition that will change the future of all the title updates going forwards. Title Update 2 takes that aggressive nature found in most of the monsters in Title Update 1 and dials it up to an 11. Let's start with Flaming Espinasse. Espinasse is one of the most frantic hunts in the base expansion of Sunbreak, so it makes sense that the Flaming variant takes this aggressive, frantic nature to a completely different level. It does this in a few ways. First, the fireballs explode multiple times, making them far more difficult to both dodge and parry. If you parry one of the first explosions, you'll almost certainly be hit by one of the subsequent ones. And once you do get hit by the fireballs, the next element of this hunt comes into play: defense down. This debuff replaces paralysis, which is great because now, no matter how many fireballs you get hit with, you'll always be able to move, and by extension, press the subscribe button. But it also sets you up for the third and most deadly aspect of this new hunt: the Nova. See, the Nova naturally does enough damage to put you in a seriously bad spot already, but if you have defense down when you get hit, this is just the cherry on top when it comes to the frantic nature of this hunt, because now with everything else going on, from the poison clouds to the fireballs everywhere to the monster aggressively charging at you and then stopping on a dime, you also have to worry about this terrifying explosion that'll make your health bar vanish in a single hit. And there's nothing you can do to stop this Nova like with the Metal Wraths and Seething Basil. You can attack all you want, but it's gonna use this move eventually. And in fact, when its health gets low enough, it actually starts throwing out a double Nova. Violet Mizutsune is a bit similar to Title Update 1 monsters in that it has a preventable super attack, so I won't spend too much time on it. This monster creates a spirit bomb above the battlefield that acts like a giant timer. You can stop it by dealing enough damage. This is a super unique take on the preventable signature attack idea, since now you can actually see it above the battlefield, almost like the moon from Majora's Mask. It adds this level of tension as this massive bubble in the air is a constant reminder that you have to either put a stop to it or get ready to run. But let's move on to something a bit more interesting. Something that's indicative of the future of the title updates: Risen Chameleos. See, up to this point we had only ever seen anomaly monsters, but when an Elder Dragon overcomes the Curios which cause anomalies, it becomes a risen version of itself. Chameleos was the first of these risen forms. Regularly, Chameleos is a bit of a goofball. It is still an Elder Dragon, so you have to take it a bit seriously, and its poison can be genuinely threatening if you don't take care of it quickly enough. But despite all of that, the whole fight has this lighthearted feel to it. Risen Chameleos, on the other hand, does this. It generates this explosion that drenches the area in this pale violet fog. This is when the actual fight begins. The scars on Chameleos begin to glow, reminding you of the affliction that it had to overcome to survive. This newfound power brings out an unrelentingly aggressive nature. With constant blasts of poison and overwhelming speed, this hunt goes from a lighthearted fight with a bit of a joke monster to a desperate struggle against this enraged creature that earns the threatening title of Elder Dragon. And now that we have Risen Chameleos, you can expect other Elders in the game to get the same sort of power up. Now, if you're starting to notice a trend here, that's because there is one that's probably already pretty clear. See, with nearly every single one of these new monsters, Capcom has changed the way we view the hunt. Whether that's dialing up the already frantic nature of the fight with something like Flaming Espinas, or totally reinventing it with something like Risen Chameleos. This idea is then continued in Title Update 3 with Chaotic Gormagala. Gore and Shigaru are these monsters that threaten the local ecosystem with their mysterious virus, and because of this, you've got to put a stop to them. Chaotic Gormagala, on the other hand, is totally different. It's a monster that's completely lost control of what was once its strongest weapon, and it's now being torn apart because of it. Kushala and Teostra go down the Espinas route of taking what was already there and amplifying it with their risen forms. And I gotta say, they're some of my favorite hunts in the series because of their ability to take these already great monsters and somehow make them even better. So with all of this, it becomes pretty clear that there are one of two scenarios going on here. The most realistic scenario is that Capcom, for whatever reason, is unable to make totally new monsters. Maybe this is due to time or resources, or maybe just laziness. But the more exciting idea, and the one that's a bit of a tinfoil hat theory of mine, is that Capcom is instead planning something huge. What if instead of using all of their resources to make smaller monsters with each update, they're saving it all up for one massive hunt with its own special arena and rules? Think of something like a totally new monster along the lines of Dalmador or Darren Moran. I don't know, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but regardless of what they choose to do, what I do know is that despite the fact that these monsters may look like reskins of old monsters with the same copy-pasted movesets, that just isn't the case. These are some of the most excellent hunts in the series that are able to excel by giving some of the best monsters in the series a chance to shine even brighter. Anyway, check out this video on why Chaotic Gormagala may be one of the most unfair hunts in not just Sunbreak, but Monster Hunter as a whole.